and ready to go, it's time to start sewing. This is my sewing machine. It's actually pretty good. It was given to me, so I'm very lucky to have it, and I'm very thankful that I have this sewing machine. It's very smooth. Oh my gosh. So, yeah, and to hold my spools of thread, I found that this is actually a really cool trick. I don't know, I just did it because I didn't have a way to keep it steady. So I usually just put it on this side and then I'll put it all through um, the the machine and get it ready. And I already put yellow thread in this bottom bobbin, so that's all ready to go. And right now I am going to pin together the pieces that I need to sew, and I think I'll start with the arms and then I'll go on to the bodies. All right, so now that I have both of these pieces together, I have the outside part. This is the part that's going to show, and then the liner is on the inside. So I pin those all together, and now it's time to sew. So what I usually like to do is, right now I'm going to do a straight stitch, and it's going to be kind of close together. What a good tip that I would suggest is, if you're not really that familiar with the sewing machine, just take a bit of scrap cloth and put it through a couple times. If you can see, I kind of did it a couple times and it looks a little bit puckered. So I kind of just like fiddle around and see what looks decent and just go from there. That's all I pretty much do. And then once I find a setting that I feel like is going to work, then that's what I use for this. So I don't just go in and start sewing it. I like to do a scrap piece of fabric and then figure it out. So once I start sewing, I'm going to sew a couple stitches down, and then I'm going to lock the stitch, which means I'm going to press this button on my sewing machine. It looks like a little U and it has an arrow, and that just means that the stitches are going to go backwards, and then I'll let it go, and then it's going to go forward, and I'm going to go all the way around. All right, now that this is all sewed together, and this is one arm. This is the outside, and then once we're all done and sewing it up, we're just gonna leave it how it is right now. But once it's done, we're gonna turn it inside out, and then everything is gonna pretty much be sewn inside out, and then you're gonna pull it inside out once it's finished. So when I attach it to the dress, this is where the dress is going to be attached to the shoulder, and then I'm just going to sew it all the way from the bottom all the way up the under of the sleeve and then down the dress this way. So I was trying to show this in, but it's kind of hard. So I'm just gonna hold it, and my sewing machine is on right now. It's just not. I took the bulb out just because the exposure was totally messing everything up, and it was kind of frustrating me. So here is how I do to make like a turn or whatever on the stitches. So I'm just going to use the knob and keep going up a bit. Actually, maybe I'll just stitch it a couple slowly. And then once I get there, right close to the edge, I'm going to put it down, lift this part up again, and then just turn the fabric. And then once I do that, I'm going to put this back down, and then I can start sewing again, and that's just going to help me keep the lines nice. And so there we go. And when you're sewing, you just want to guide it through. You don't want to push it or pull it or anything. You just want to just guide it through because it's already going through as it is. And if you push it or pull it at the back, like if you pull it back here, you're going to make your stitches like go all puckered up and stuff, and it's not going to be flat, so you don't want to do that. So I'm just going to keep on sewing until I get to the corner again, and then once I get to the corner, I'll just do one stitch in there. There we go. And then once it's down, put this up again, turn it, and then I can go on stitching straight. So there we go, and then keep going. And then do that same thing again. Open it up, turn it, sorry, and then put this down, and then just keep on sewing. And honestly, I'm not even gonna apologize about my man hands. Like, I live in Canada, it's freaking cold up here. My hands get really dry, I get eczema, so so I planned out how I wanted to space my rows on a piece of paper, and I drew it all out. So what I did was I measured where my belt sits on my waist, and then I measured the whole skirt part, so that came up to 32.5 inches. And then I decided that I wanted 5 rows, so I divided 32.5 by 6 because that's 5 rows. So if you think about it, like you're dividing it into like 6 parts, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is going to give you your 5 lines. So it just kind of depends how many you want and what type of dress you're making, but for myself, I like to have 5 rows. So I did that, and then I found out that I need to have my rows 5.5 inches apart. So I went onto my dress and I kind of ticked off very, very lightly 5.5 inches all the way down. These rows are pretty spaced apart, but I think it's gonna look all right. You can do it smaller, it just depends how many rows you want, how many cones you want. Like, I would suggest just having a scrap piece of paper and just figuring it all out on a paper before you do any markings or anything like that on your dress, because last night when I was trying to figure it out, it took me so long because I just couldn't figure out like how to do it. And so that just shows that this is a learning process for me as well. So you just have to be careful and don't make any tick marks or anything on your dress until you're like really sure. So what I did here is, this is my dress. I went 5.4 and then I did that every 5.4, and then I also measured how I want this line to be, and this was 11 inches for me. So I did 11 inches, and then each one on the sides here is 5 inches. So I did that 5 inches up. So that's going to make my V shape. And then on the other side, I did the same thing. I measured 11, and then I did 5, and I made very, very tiny tick marks right on the side because, again, this is going to show, like, if you have a light material like a white or like a yellow, you want to be very sure of where you're going to put your marks, because if not, these are going to show once you sew it all out. And if you decide to do a different one, like, just keep in mind that your lines are going to show, so you have to be very sure that that is what you're going to do. Okay, so I made out all my rows, and then I took this piece that I made earlier and I actually lined it up, and then I just made a tick mark every single place that I'm going to put one of my tabs. So I did that for all the way down, and then the extra wide bias tape is going to just go over top of it. So this is where your tacky glue is going to come in. I bought this one just in case because it helps that much. So once I'm done doing all the tick marks, I'm just going to take my glue and I'm going to make a little dab of glue on all of those marks. And then I'm going to take my tabs that I already cut out. They're all in this bag. I'm going to take my tabs and I'm just going to simply stick them on and then let it sit for a little while, and then as I go along I'll grab this bias tape and then I'll just put it over top. So I'll show that once I get it going. So I finished all the tabs here. They're all glued down. So now it's time for the extra wide. So this, I just want to say that I normally put the folded end on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my glue. I'm just going to make a bunch of dots all the way down to the middle. And then once I do that, I'm just going to put this on top. And yeah, if you have if your rows are straight across, you don't have to cut it and make different pieces to it. You can just put it straight across like that and then just cut it on the sides or whatever. But because mine comes to a point, I'm going to be splitting it up into two just so that it looks a lot more neat. And yeah, so I'm going to do that for all the rows all the way down, and then I'm going to let this one dry and I'm going to do the other piece, the other panel, and then once that one's dry, I'm going to start sewing. Glued down, and I already went and sewed all of these lines, and this is the last line on the first side that I've done. So in here on the bottom I have the yellow so that it doesn't show, like, it's gonna be on the inside anyways, but just for, the sake of it, I guess I just put yellow on the bottom so that it doesn't show. And then I have my blue thread in there, so it's going to be blue on top. And then I don't know, I like to go over it once with a straight stitch, and then I go over it again with a zigzag stitch just to kind of reinforce it, because cones are heavy, and especially if you're going to be jumping up and down and dancing and everything like that, you're going to want to reinforce it as much as you can, which is what I do, especially for little kids. I think it would be better to do that, just in case, because these tabs can actually fall off and you don't want that to happen, especially if you're at a powwow and you don't have a sewing machine or anything like that. But that is also why I carry an extra little sewing kit from the dollar store. But yeah, so I just go over it twice. So I'm going to do this one first, and then I'm going to go and do the zigzag after that. I roll up my dress like this, and then I just put it in there, and I'm going to stitch a couple down, and then again I'm going to lock that stitch. This is kind of hard to do with one hand, but it's alright. And then I'm just going to sew all the way down, just guide it through nicely, and I'm going to do that. And then once I get to the end, I'm going to lock the stitch again, and then that's all it is. Okay, so I got both of the pieces all sewn up, and I lined up the bias tape, and then I pinned it so that I can make sure that they all line up, and they do, because they're all 5 inches apart. So I'm not going to sew up the sides until the very end pretty much. So right now I'm just going to, I pinned it to keep it together, and I'm just going to sew the top of the shoulders right now. Okay, now that everything is sewn up, I did the shoulders. Once I did the shoulders, I actually, oh, before I did that, I also took this side to make the neck part bigger so that my head can fit through it. I measured from here to 2 inches on this side, and then I pretty much just pinned it around here, and then I just drew a line. I also, like, you have to fold it in half and then just pretty much cut it out, and that's gonna give you your head hole. And then, so now I'm moving on to the arm part. So I laid out my dress so that one side is on that side and the other side is on this side. I folded it up, and then I have my arm piece now. I folded it in half and I made a tick mark for the center, and then I just pinned it in the middle. So now what I did was I put together the seams. This is just like extra or whatever. I put together the seams and I pinned it all the way down. So now I'm going to start sewing, and I'm going to sew this whole thing all the way this way, and that's going to attach the arm to the shoulder. So once that's done, we're almost done. We're just going to attach the cuff and then pretty much just sew these parts together. And then just finishing touches, which would be the rest of the bias tape like around here, just so that there's no like threads sticking out, and that's all. All right, if you've made it with me this far, congratulations. We're almost done the dress. It's been 2 days. So yeah, this is what I did. I I'm just about to sew the last part of the dress, and then I'm going to put bias tape around the bottom and just close it all off, and then I'm pretty much going to be done. So what I did was I put bias tape on the neck part, and you can also like later go through and just cut off all of these stray pieces of thread. But I did that, and I also did the cuff. So now I just pinned it all the way over there, and I'm going to sew it all the way here and all the way down, and then that is it. That's everything for this dress. So I'll show a video once I'm done that.